The original idea for the pool guy was to emphasize, of course, Jerry and this guy, Ramon, the pool guy, how Ramon wants to be like Jerry's best buddy. He kind of wants to be like the fifth member of their group. Worlds colliding as is kind of like a theme in the pool guy. Because you also have worlds colliding as we explore another aspect of, committed relationships with George and Susan here. George getting to know, Susan kind of hanging around Jerry's friends more, particularly Elaine. But the original idea was to have Ramon, the pool guy, have kind of like a Hispanic accent, be like a Latino or whatnot. They originally had casted, I think his name was Danny Hawk, but then as he went on, guy who could do different accents. I guess he didn't want to do the accent they were looking for, and I guess they had like a different mindset of it. They didn't have to change like cultures or worlds colliding. Just Jerry and someone who's just too goofy and too much, which I feel we've kind of touched on this subject several times in Seinfeld, such as of course in the male unbonding, the second episode of the whole series, where Jerry was trying to get rid of a friend that was trying to just latch on to him all the time, like Ramon, the pool guy, does in this episode as well. This was also apparently a critical episode where, at the beginning of the series, they weren't sure, what direction they were going to go with the characters of George and Susan. But after this episode, and I feel like, after reading, of course, the trivia, that they kind of implied this episode that Susan don't really mesh well with George's friends. It kind of led more to the direction of where they were going to do with Susan at the end of this season. Because, of course, like I said before, back in the engagement, there was rumors that first season 7 was going to be the last season. They thought they would end it with George getting married. But, of course, that's not what happened, as we all know. But let's talk about the pool guy episode. A good episode. I wouldn't say I enjoyed it as much as the secret code, but it was a solid episode. So, Jerry had gotten involved at a new health club. And I guess there was a pool guy there named Ramon who constantly tried to, chit-chat with Jerry and whatnot. He wanted to be Jerry's buddy, like a lot of people do. And Jerry's like, no, I have no room for no more friends, basically. Ramon, though, had originally gotten fired because apparently he put too much chlorine in the pools. And then Jerry and Kramer were trying to go see a movie. Of course, then they get inside and they have this discussion about the buffer zone. Of course, these zones, worlds colliding. I guess gotta have a buffer zone so Jerry and Kramer don't collide, basically. But they're like, yeah, if we were sitting at home watching a movie together, would we be sitting next to each other on the couch so Kramer leaves the seat empty in between Jerry and Kramer? Well, then Ramon comes in and, didn't realize that Ramon was seeing the same movie. So Jerry and Kramer try making chit-chat to make Ramon think that seat was not available. Of course, he finds Jerry, and he takes a seat anyways. So, of course, and then Ramon, I guess, tagged along with them, and basically they latched on, and then they went to the coffee shop and with Jerry and Kramer and talked for 2 hours. Finally, they get back to the building and says, Ramon, I gotta go to bed. Kind of his way of trying to get out of it. Of course, Jerry tries to put a halt to that, stop to that, but of course, let's get to the other portion of the main, one of the the bigger stories of this episode. Of course, was Elaine at the beginning of the episode had asked Jerry if he wanted to go see some clothing exhibit with her, which Jerry's like, no. And then I forgot how it came up, but then he then suggested, why don't you ask Susan? And Elaine was thinking, yeah. She's like, I don't have any female friends. Why don't I get to know Susan more? So she said she'll think about it. To which Kramer mentions it's not a good idea. That's worlds colliding for George. And George is not going to like that. Later, of course, whenever George was back home with Susan, Elaine calls wanting to talk to Susan. And then George first was like, yeah, right. What was really up? And they're like, no, for real. I want to talk to Susan. So, of course, George did not feel too comfortable. And And where he finds out, and Susan's like, yeah, cool, let's do this. So Elaine and Susan start hanging out more and becoming friends. They had a great time at the exhibit. George also gets flustered because apparently Elaine opened her vault, which, freaks out George even more because he's wondering, where they're talking about me about. And there was that scene where basically he's telling Jerry that if she's allowed to infiltrate this world, then George Costanza, as you know, ceases to exist. You see, you have independent relationship George, but there's also independent George. That's the George you know. Coffee George, movie George, liar George, like all these different Georges. And then he mentions how he's dying, Jerry. If relationship George walks right in through the door, he will kill independent George. And then, just he even spats on Elaine, and Elaine, basically, just like saying, no, we're not doing this. There was a scene also in the episode wherever the four of them, Elaine was meeting Susan for lunch, Jerry was to meet George for lunch, both at the same place. Of course, Kramer happens to stop by also, and basically all four of them are there until George gets there and he realizes no room for five, so he walks out because he, just can't stand these worlds colliding and whatnot. So then Jerry, meanwhile, is trying to get rid of Ramon. The day after, of course, he just latches onto him and Kramer. Jerry's getting ready to go out and do some stuff, but then Ramon tries to tag along with him there. They're on a subway. Jerry finally got sick of it and told Ramon, we need to, go separate ways right now. And basically Ramon takes complete offense to that. Because Jerry was also getting teased back at the health club about him and Ramon hanging out. And they're kind of said they were like, oh, you buddy with Ramon, and Jerry was just not comfortable with it. So of course Ramon happened to get his job back at the health club, and basically he was just going after Jerry, making his life miserable. He took away his towels, to which Newman got all of his towels, of all people, Newman. And then came the scene where Jerry was swimming in the pool, and then Ramon was purposely trying to get his squeegee in the way of Jerry just to get his revenge. And then Jerry was like, can you let me finish first? I know what you're doing, Ramon. I'm not stupid. So finally Jerry got sick of it. He tugged on trying to get the squeegee off Ramon. Ramon happened to fall in. At the same time, Newman was running to the pool going, oh, yeah, oxygen free. He jumps and does a big cannonball. And, of course, we didn't actually see him land on him, but he was supposed to knock out Ramon. And then, of course, Jerry and Newman were going back and forth about who's going to give him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation. Neither of them wanted to do it, of course, but it's like, they're trying to get him feel guilty. Like, you knocked him in. You knocked him out, but you pulled him in. He might die. Finally, eventually, someone did, give him mouth-to-mouth, but Jerry's and Newman's membership got revoked, and they basically can't be seen there anytime soon. So then, let's get to this. Let's also mention the other side plot. So Kramer got a new phone number, and I guess it was because a lot of strange people had his number, and he wanted to get a new number to clear. But I guess his number was, I think it was 555-3455, which spells out 555 Filk, F-L-I-L-K. So that's one digit off from 555 Film Movie Phone. I think that was one of the writers had a story about where they, he had a friend in college who I guess had a number one digit off of some other entertainment service. So they thought that'd be a funny story for Kramer, to where he finally realized what's going on. And, after, he was getting tired of, all the wrong number calls, he finally started realizing what's going on. So he thought, okay, Kramer's being Kramer, embraces being movie film. And he starts calling, first he's just like answering the phone normally and saying, oh no, I'll help you out. Then finally he starts like calling, pretending he's like an answering service, like, hello, and welcome to Movie Phone. And do all these advertisements. But of course, when he's telling people to, which we've seen Elaine and George throughout the episode call them, he's trying to guess what they're saying whenever they're pressing in the first three digits or whatnot on the code. Finally, he keeps saying, why don't you just tell me the movie you're looking for and whatnot. Of course, Elaine basically, busted him, but I guess so then there's one night where Elaine and Susan want to go see a movie, and Jerry was going to tag along. And, of course, George wasn't home, so they just left him a note. I think they were going to go see Chunnel. And, of course, they got done talking about the incident at the pool with Ramon. And I guess when Elaine ordered the tickets and seeing the bloopers, she was laughing too. They go to see Chunnel. And they say, 3 for Chunnel, 2 adults. And she looks at Jerry and goes, 1 child. So they go see the movie. George gets back. And, the girls are gone. Susan's gone out. She sees the note, and he wants to, just barge in because they're going to movies without him, and he can't stand them, the two of them, bonding. Well, Susan bonding with all of his friends, as it's really the first time that Susan basically bonded with them without George around. So he, of course, calls movie film. Well, he dials Kramer's number by mistake, and Kramer is going all in at this point, and of course, George doesn't realize it's Kramer, though. Elaine did, but George didn't. So, I think he basically wants the Paragon and Chunnel, so he knows that's where they're at. So then Kramer had told him about they're playing in this theater at this time. George hangs up the phone and runs out, but Kramer said there was a second showing at a different time in a different, in a different theater at the Paragon also. George, however, goes and he accidentally goes to the wrong theater and he's trying to find him and he's making so much noise, and there's like a shot where he's like in the front of the theater, all you see is his head, yelling out into the crowd saying, "Oh, you're laughing at me!" But it was just hysterical until someone finally says, "You realize you might be in the wrong theater?" And they were playing in 2 different theaters, and George didn't know. Of course, he was escorted out by security guards in the episode, but also, we do see a scene with Jerry, Elaine, and Susan, where Jerry and Elaine are making a little comments, and Susan's not the type to be, making comments during movies. Afterwards, basically, Susan mentions that, she didn't really, she turned down the invite to go out for coffee, I think, with them. Basically advising that, I don't really feel we just mesh well together. Which is also kind of like what was realized after this episode. It's been said throughout the years that Heidi Sweetberg and Jason Alexander had difficulty, working together. Alexander just thought it was a hard time to get the comedic timing right with her. And then this episode was the first opportunity that Jerry and Elaine had to interact with Susan, without George. And then this episode caused them to realize, I guess, that they had difficulties also. So this kind of planted the seed even more for the plan of what was going to happen to Susan by the end of season 7. So, pivotal moment there. The only other fun fact I have about this is, I guess, Wayne Knight was a little bit uncomfortable with the scene where he had to, run in a bathing suit, going like, "Oh, yo, accent free!" and then jump in because, his weight and whatnot. He thought they were making fun of his weight, but they were like, no, that was not the point. The point was that they were trying to have him look like, super excited, like a little kid, and jumping into, the accident or whatnot, which I thought was that aspect is funny, but I get it where Wayne Knight was coming from. But yeah, that's the Pool Guy episode. Good episode, not one of my favorites, but I think it was good. We now have, of course, the next episode coming up after this, which I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it is, or is there one more? Oh, yes! The next episode. The Sponge. Are you sponge-worthy? We'll have to find out next. So, guys, that's my thoughts on The Pool Guy. Again, solid episode, but not one of my favorites. What are your thoughts on the Pool Guy episode, guys? Be sure to leave thoughts down in the comments section below. And be sure, as always, to slap a like on the video, subscribe or contact my channel. Oh, crap, I forgot! The last scene was the guy who really does movie phone basically come to Kramer's door, basically wants to, get his hands on him because he's like, "You're stealing my business," basically, whatnot. And Kramer tried hiding in his apartment, not open up the door, but of course he says he's going to barge in, so who knows what happens. But I guess Kramer stopped being movie film since his number was 555 Filk, basically. But anyway, so yeah, slap a like on the video, subscribe, more content on my channel, follow me on Twitter as well at DemandAirboy93. And I'll see you guys in the next review, which is The Sponge. Catch you guys later, guys. Have a good night. Peace out, everybody.